Nobody buys that stuff. That's like farming. Where's the sender down?
Freaked up some of it. But anyway, I'd like to thank you, Frank and Lois, for the day that you people cooperated with us, with these 3 American busloads of people, and a little token of our, I want to present it on behalf of the Nordco Board of Directors. Not just for me, but Nordco Board of Directors. And this is in appreciation for your cooperation and hospitality and the work that you've done preparing for these 3 busloads of Americans that we had come up.
Actually, I'd like them to come back around Christmas time because maybe we could get the house finished by then.
Yeah. Yeah.
We invited them back next year. Maybe I might have it finished now. Isn't that something? Look at that.
Show it to the camera.
Get that. So, very glaring. Well, I want to say right off the top, for the record, all these cameras working here should know that while this is a big project and we're getting recognition beyond our expectations when it was first conceived on that envelope, that none of this at all would have been even started had it not been for my partner Lois here. And you know, it's just a constant source of encouragement and very expert critique. She reads all those fashion magazines, so we know what's in style, you know. But although she herself doesn't seem to be an artist, she sure does have a good eye. And that is a very important thing for me because I can go on in confidence that this is going to look right and going to be right. And I consult with her on almost everything except when I buy the tools.
Yes.
That's a source of consternation, but that's all right. It works, and of course we still have the tools and we can sell them if I happen to break my arms again and not work them. But she's always there with the coffee and encouragement, and I'm not used to that in my life previous to the one with Lois. And a lot of times I just feel like I'm doing it for her, but it always turns out it's for us, and that's always very beautiful. So your name really should be on this too.
We realize that too.
Yeah.
After the fact.
That's all right. I don't mind. I'm very happy to be associated with Frank Sudol.
Yeah.
So.
I don't want to drop.
These are really stoves. They're not. This is not really a fireplace. The fireplace is an incidental thing. I went to the United States to learn to build this kind of stove. It's a very complicated stove inside. It's a Finnish design. Actually, the design comes from Finland and refined by American engineers. And I went to the United States and we built 1 or 2 of these. And then I came back and we designed the other stove that's over here. It happens to look like the same stove, but there are 2 of them. The other one is 18 feet high and it's fired in the basement. This one is just the way you see it. And these are an old concept, something the old-timers always knew. And that is, you build the firebox from clay or clay brick. And what you do, and you make it very small, and you build a fire that's extremely intense in heat. So it burns way above the temperature at which creosote forms. So the creosote will burn. Not only that, but it will burn all of the gases that normally don't burn in an iron stove. So they claim that there's nothing less than 85% efficiency, but they really claim that it should be about 95. So that out of every armload of wood, I get 95% of the heat into the house from it. And how they do that is that they make the heat rise and then come back down and then around and then out into the chimney. So that in the passageway, it heats the clay inside and then the rocks. And then these rocks radiate the heat to the house. I fire these stoves only 3 hours out of every 24. And for 21 hours, there is no fire in this house. No fire, except maybe in that iron. And on all that time, the temperature is exactly the same every split second of the day. And it's radiant heat. Everything you touch is warm. When you touch a chair, when you touch anything, it's warm. And when you pass by, it's warm. And the air that touches, the cooler air that touches the stove and the chimney, which all gets warm. There's 1,700 square feet of stone, warm stone. And that warm air rises. And because there are so many square feet of warm rock, there's a lot of air rising. And if you release a little bit of perfume in that corner, or even in the bedroom, in a very short time, you can smell it throughout the house. Without a fan, without anything. And the fans are not necessary up there, although I do have them. I put them up there because I didn't, well, I don't think they was going to work, but it works. They told me it was going to work. I didn't need fans, and I don't need fans. So we monitored all of this with thermometers and made notes, and I fired this one winter because I built furniture in here. And sure enough, it works. So these are mass masonry stoves. I heat 29 tons of brick and clay in a 3-hour burn. And it's like filling a big barrel of water in, 5 minutes and then poking holes in the bottom and letting the water run for a whole day, You know how it is? It would just be a steady stream. It's the same idea. It's not the same thing, really. I don't get water out of this thing, but the heat just comes out. And by measuring the amount of wood, and I know how much heat I can get out of a pound of wood, that I build a pile accordingly. We burn that. And it is an inferno when it's burning. It is just something to behold. We get temperatures. This stove is built to withstand temperatures at 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. And we had reached that a couple of times because we melted the iron that's in the stove. And we even deteriorated the refractory that's in it. Now, that was made for 2,800. And I had to rebuild that before the summer was over for this winter. I had stainless steel, 3/8 inch plate that completely disappeared inside, so I had to replace that. And they are made so that one can get in and replace the whole innards of it without touching the rock. It stays, and then build it up. And that's not a problem. It's easy to do. So we are going to fire more carefully instead of having, and not just with poplar wood, just with poplar. I can melt iron with this thing. I know I can because I melted my grate. I melted it. I didn't just burn it. I melted it. It was gloss. So it's amazing, and yet the doors here and the glass did not melt because the draft goes right underneath and comes up the back face of the glass. So they didn't. Well, what else can I say about this? When it came time to put some surface on, like the rocks, we're thinking about all kinds of things. Everybody uses phony rock. I could use phony rock. It's a lot lighter. That's 29 feet up to the top. It would have been a lot easier. But I remember my father, when I was about 4 years old, he and I were picking rocks in the field. And I don't remember much of him. I guess he spanked me a lot or something. But I remember this, that he was encouraging me to pick. Come on, Frank, pick, someday we're going to make something nice out of it. well, what's a 4-year-old know about that? But I remember that. The other members of the family, well, he died right away. He died shortly after. I was just very small. And the others moved away, and there was really nobody left to do that. And when Lois and I decided this would be where we'd spend the rest of our lives, it occurred to me that Dad had a dream. And I went to that pile where we had been picking. It's far into the bush now. The fields somehow have been made smaller by encroaching trees. And it was a rock pile that all of the family picked into. And it was the only one. All the others had renters and previous people after putting rocks, so you couldn't tell. And of all the rocks in that pile, it seemed like the red ones were the most prevalent, and there would be enough of them to build this stove face. So I started my very first rock work in all of my life. And that's some kind of trick when you're going to do a showpiece and you've never done it before. It's scary, but I went right ahead with it and I pinched away. And I put the keystone is the Polish eagle. And my dad came from Austria and my mother was Polish. And I guess that makes me a Polak. And I thought that even though this is a Finnish stove and that's a Russian stove, it's still built by a Polak. Therefore, it's a Polish eagle. And we had a dedication here 2 years ago. My mother was here. She'll be here tomorrow again. And we made a dedication to Dad Mom. And we unveiled the Polish eagle for her, and of course she wept, but there it is. I do have another kind of story about this, of course, because this is a Finnish stove, and this is a Russian stove built by a Polak from Paddockwood, that this makes it a Polish stove. And a Polish stove is a bonfire. And that's why the bonfire picture on the Russian stove. It becomes more incredible as each time I say it. I don't know whatever possessed me, but I sure did the right thing. We had a stone out on the field that was so big that no horses could pull it out. We had to kind of go around it, and it was just flat with the other, with the surrounding. We didn't want trees and weeds to grow on it, so kind of went over top, and it was a nemesis. We got a bigger tractor, and it was too small. Then we got our biggest tractor, and it was too small to pull it out. We spent hours at that sucker. And then when I came back, after 22 years being away from this farm, I remembered that big stone up there. It says, I am taking that sucker out of there. And I purchased a crawler, which I used to build this house and do my logging operations. But I went out there, and I dug it out, and I pushed it out. And it was huge. But it was flat, beautifully flat. In fact, that's the flatness, that's the piece of this rock. I purchased diamond saws and all. Of course, you can't do rock work seriously if you don't have diamond saws and brickwork. So, in fact, you can't build the inside of these stoves out of diamond saws. So I thought we bought a diamond saw. And I went out there with my electric generator, and I have a 16-inch skill saw, a big one. And I put that 14-inch diamond blade on it, and I cut a piece out of it. And it took me about 4 hours, and I cut about a 300-pound piece out of that. This is much smaller than that, of course. And I brought it home, I shaped it again, I cut it to fit inside where there had been a wooden one, which caught fire, incidentally. And so I take it out, and I'm going to have one that won't burn. But this is a piece of the nemesis that has plagued our machinery for years, for 40-some years. And I have mounted that sucker like the big bad bear that ate our cattle forever. Man, so this is my trophy. Still don't like. I never picked any stones from their fields. Or what my mama didn't like. My mother was a widow, when it was very early in years, and so a lot of people have been taking advantage of her. I kind of forgot about that because that's pretty cruel. A woman farming way back in the 40s, the hell, you won't have that happen. So they were going to make it hard for her. So I recall. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. I went to the neighbors and I got all this sandy type stone and we split it. We split it right where we found it, and when it looked good, we brought it home. If it didn't, we left it there. And you know, one of the miracle things that I talked about before was that one day, just as I was getting started, a visitor came all by himself in a car, drove up to here, hardly could get out of the car. And I vaguely knew him from a long time ago. John Gill was his name. Paddock. And he says, I want to come to see what you're up to. I hear all kinds of things. He says, boy, you got a lot of work here. I'm not very strong. If I can help you, I'll be here every day. This is, well, I'm just working on the stonework. That's heavy, John. Gee. Well, maybe I can make some mud. Maybe I can hand you rock. Well, if you can do that, I find out that he is either going to die of a heart attack, and he's got cancer. He's got cancer in his shoulder, and it hurts him to work. And he says, I haven't got much time. I haven't worked in 18 years. If I can give you a hand before I die, I would like to be a part of this house. It's going to be nice. So, a great big pile of sand over there. John, he started to mix in a wheelbarrow my mortar. Well, he's sweating a little bit, and so we're watching him carefully. We don't want him to have a heart attack in his house. 3 weeks later, John and I finished that chimney. And he was uncanny. He could, from down here with all the rocks laid out on the floor, he could hand me the rock that would fit that spot. And he put it in the pail and he says, Frank, here, that will work. So I'll bet you it'll work. So I bet him a nickel, and I lost a lot of money. But I was so happy because, you know, that sucker, he did that. And he felt so good. He got his color back, and he says, you know, I'm not even using my painkiller anymore. You know, I feel good now. So downstairs, there's a full basement under this 2,800 square foot, 2,800 square feet of mud down there. He says, we got to do something about that. Got to do something. John, it's mud. He says, I don't care. We got to pick it up. Got to get something down there. So we got a little bobcat, and we can drive into the basement in this house. And we took out 110 cubic yards, and he must have shoveled himself at least 20. And he just got stronger and stronger. He spent 7 weeks here until it was finished. Boy, he'd drive me. He'd be here before I was still eating breakfast, and he'd be here. Come on, Frank, come on, come on. I know you need a rest, but this got to be done. He was also Polak, but he would deny it. But he was a driver. So to him, I owe a lot of this. Michael Marcotte, a kid that spent, I think, 10 months here from Birch Hill, he was the fellow who split most of these. He and I went out into them. He came and worked here quit his job and worked here to learn these things. And I should mention Michael Marcotte. So between John and Michael, this whole thing is, well, actually, Michael helped me build the inside of it. You know, that was great. And he died shortly after John did. There's nothing else for him to do. And so we have a platform. It's not here. We wanted it bronzed. We had one. We presented him a brass one. The day before he died, I went up there and I showed it to him. He is so happy about that. But there'll be a bronze one here.
This holds the heat.
Well, the roof is 14 inches thick.
Oh,
And the walls they're 6 inches inside, and then there's one inch lower on the side, 1 inch on that side, so that's really effectively 8 inches away. And the walls are quite thick, and there's insulation between the walls and on the outside. And most of them are 3 inches. Oh, right from here to the wall. So I had to clear them out of this spot before I could build a basement here and there. The far bedroom and the far wall as it is in the kitchen. Yeah, I would have to give you that. But it's never less than 4 degrees.
More than 40 feet.
Yeah.
That's what I find amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I find amazing. We built that.
In one of those places is where the symphony plays, and that's where they have the world-class pipe organ. And that pipe organ, you can look at it here. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it is as large as this house. It's 33 feet high, the tallest pipe, and this house is 34, and it's about 70 feet wide. And it's just a little thing inside this huge building. Anyway, they wanted me to fill the space in, right dead center of this pipe organ, with a rose, or maybe 2 roses. But they wanted to pay my way up there, to have a look at it, to give me some advice if I didn't want to do it. And I said, sure, I'll go for a trip to Calgary, I'll go. I'll take Lois, this is yuck. And they fed us there and everything, and I just was stunned and bowled over when they got me into this place. And it says, I am going to have a piece in here. Anyway, I just got energized and excited, and I just made a proposal and verbally right there. And I sent back, I came in, I did this thing in about 10 minutes. No, I did this one first. And it looked like a cabbage, so I threw it away. I said, it's got to look like a rose and not like a cabbage, but it can't have many leaves, because if you're going to carve this like this, and it is in the honor of Mrs. Mannix Sr., who raised about $11 million for this whole place. See? And Mrs. Mannix, and that's the Mannix Corporation, you know, the construction company. And there's a foundation that she started, which is called the Carthy Foundation, and the president told me, I didn't know him, but Lois knew him. So we've got to, you know, Lois knows everybody. And by jingles, I sent him this. I made a cardboard cutout and rendered it black, and I sent some samples, and it says it has to be of oak, it has to be this color, and Mrs. Mannix loved yellow roses, so it'll be tinged with yellow. Okay? So I sent him that, and he says, hang it up there, have a look at it. If you want it, that's the deal. That's how much it's going to cost you. I got a phone call back as soon as I got it. It says, they love it. You can go ahead. Here's the money for the retainer, and go ahead. So I carved it out of oak. And so before I carved anything, I made one out of plasticine. Okay? This will be better lighting for you. Okay? Made out of plasticine. About that's what this is. Eh? Isn't that pretty close? Fairly close. And then, of course, once you do it on a plasticine, then you know what to do with the wood, and you measure and caliper and so on. So it took me about a day to do a rose. Not quite a day. It took me about 2/3 of a day to do a 1 rose out of oak. That's about 3 inches high and deep, and so this is easy. The leaves are curled, and so they're all alive, and everything is going and swerves, because everything in this whole place is stark. It's either up or horizontal, up and down or horizontal. So this is the only thing that's and live, and it was appropriate that we do that. So I tinged them with yellow, put them up there, and just before the Olympics, because then they had the international deal there, so they wanted to have it. That was great. Got to stay for the Olympics. geographic.
This
Behind you are my furniture, and I guess that's really what I started. I don't know, maybe I should start there, but now that I'm here, I've gone to turning wood on the lathe, and I've gone a member of the American Turners Association and whatever. And the idea is when I get a little time, I do some turning. Here's a piece which I call the spittoon, and it is from a burl that grows in this country. In fact, this one is from Fort Carlton, which is in the picture in the room. The tree that fell over it had a growth on it. It's a maple tree. You know, the maple, the box elder. And I saved some of the bark, and this looks like a spittoon with somebody with an acid spit and just ate it off the rim. But it was my first ambitious piece, and I feel it now. I say, well, technically it's lacking, but I think the idea was great. I gave it to Lois. So all the pieces are here that actually belong to her. There's nothing here for sale anymore. There were some nice pieces for sale, but they went before I even got them up here. But that's a nice one. This one's a bird's eye maple. It's a I wouldn't adjudicate this as any screaming hell, but technically it's not bad. But artistically, since we've established the Saskatchewan tree as being birch, this is birch, Saskatchewan birch, and this is rotten birch, or more politely called spalted birch, and it's beautifully marked. It's a birch that, when it gets to this stage, is rotten. You can almost stick your finger through the wood, but because it's old, it has a beauty that only comes from old age. And this is a good pot to give some old person saying, hey, you know, just because you're old, you're also beautiful like nobody else can be unless they're old. But this is remarkable. This is extremely difficult to build because, you know, it can blow to hell, and yet do it thinly, or make it thin. And this is a new finish that I've put on. So this I gave to Lois as my next step up at designing these things. I find it very fascinating. So I'll be doing quite a bit more work on this. I think I'll just stay with exquisite gifts of birch. Just nice things. Let somebody else make the small ones. We need a lot of them. Yeah, that's nice. I think that's okay. And I just have to now get more rotten logs. Let's see. You had my other carving in there. This is a commission that I got. Also a competition I entered. It was to carve sports figures for the Canada Summer Games coming up in Saskatoon next year, '89. And I went down there with another thing that I have over there. I said, well, I think, you know, this is my state of carving. You think that I could even do it? And they liked the lily, and so I submitted an idea of what maybe they should be doing for these figures. Now the idea is that you do a sports figure with only half the size. So they're mounted against a polished brass, and you see the other half of the sports figure as a reflection. Well, this one would be fine, except he'd have two hands. And so most of the sports figures are spread eagle. Anyway, they paid me very handsomely for 8 figures now, and they're already in the vaults. These two are rejects. This one's for Labatt's Brewery because they sponsor baseball. But and these figures will hang in the corporate offices of all those companies that give $250,000 or more as a sponsor. So I'll have my carvings in corporate offices. But this one is a reject because you see, of course, when you put this on a reflection and he has two faces. I suppose maybe you know about two-faced ball players, but we didn't want to talk about that, so they rejected this. We did it more of a profile on the other, and of course the legs were different, but we were learning. And I got to be, got the right tools and got the skills honed up, and I can whip one of these off in a day. And it's kind of neat. This is in walnut. I learned a lot in the process. And by the time I got the last one, and I got some detail in there that I didn't think I could use. So that was neat. Oh, the other things. I want to go hand carved and made with epoxy so that so she could put we could put liquor into it and so on. If you look through the catalog of events here, I made around about the same time. I made a set. Oh yeah, of a decanter that would hold a bottle of wine, and a tray and 6 glasses, of which only I have a picture of 4, and that's all epoxy. They can drink from it. Oh, it was a very expensive thing because it was done in bird's eye maple, and so that was an exciting piece. For the longest time, I thought poplar was going to be the tree for Saskatchewan, but so I started making things out of poplar like I did out of birch, but it didn't turn out that way. They chose birch instead. Anyway, something you can look at. We just look at the things here.
I'm just stepping in to make sure he's not selling anything that's on the machine. He has a habit of doing that.
I don't know if this might bother you. Is it the contrast is too high? I think that you're going to have a little trouble with the lighting. This is a lily. I've maintained as a carver among our own people that we should be carving much better things than the old carvers used to, because we have tools that can certainly do the job much better than they could. You know? So I carved this without once using a chisel with little tools, but you can still make terrible mistakes. I carved them individually, very, very thin, almost as thin as the real thing. I don't know if you touched it or not. It's really quite delicate, but it's quite strong. And I thought, well, very appropriate. We should be carving these out of birch, because then that encompasses the Saskatchewan's tree and Saskatchewan's flower. Yeah, that was I could probably do quite well if I could just stay with the flowers. But I'm partial to them because I'm trained as a botanist and identification of plants. And I spent a hell of a long time in university learning about this, not ever having much to do with it after all. Here we go. This was an original idea. We're talking outside about our complex that we have about being Saskatchewan people, and that because we're from Saskatchewan, we're really nobody because Ontario is better, and British Columbia is probably better than that even. At least that's how I grew up thinking. This is a mentality. And but after having repaired furniture coming from the East, and the opinions that people had about the kind of stuff we get here after the East picks it over, we thought that maybe we could make some furniture for our own people, out of our own materials, made by our own people. And so I thought I would choose Saskatchewan birch. We'd make it like the shape of the province of Saskatchewan with the crest. And this chair was then designed originally way back before I knew very much about design. I still don't know very much about design, but I know a little more than this, enough to say that this design needs to be redesigned, but the idea is great. I would carve these chairs to present to Saskatchewan people who have given a lot to the province. And if somebody would collect a whole lot of money and buy him or her a chair with that person's endeavor carved in the background. Wouldn't that be nice? hell of an idea. But not many people bought that. So I have to redesign it because it doesn't look that good. I have the forest and the wheat and lily because that might be a standard thing. I suppose if I make it a little bit better. So what I thought was Saskatchewan birch with walnut trim, American walnut trim. At that time I had a cockamamie idea that the Americans on our borders give us a trimming anyway, so that would be appropriate. And we better not talk that way anymore, and because this probably isn't true. Well, I get to work on redesigning this. I think it'll be a winner. This is my first major carving in all my life. The only thing I carved before I carved this was a platter, just a simple platter. And this is not an original idea. Every beginner has to copy somewhere along the way. But this was a copy from a photograph, so I had to make it bigger, and I had to guess what these proportions are. And I gave it to Lois because it was the first. And this was the first, and we kept that. This is a successful chair, a very successful chair design. And it looks nice from the back, and it looks nice from the side, something that chair doesn't. And so it's a really exquisite chair. I was pretty excited about that. Actually, there's a long story to it, but what happened is that the lady wanted an original design at Middle Lake. Mrs. Susan Bauer, actually, is her name. And she wanted birds that were important in her life since she came from Germany, carved in high relief, in that kind of carving in here. And that table, and then later a buffet. Well, it cost a fortune, and I agreed that if I could design this thing, she wanted the only one. I could only have one chair, which is this one, and didn't want anybody else to have the design. But it would take me a long time to design it. So we made a deal that her pieces could be on tour for as much as a year. And she agreed because she thought, well, if he make it for those people to like, you be careful how he makes it. So this is that was clever of her. And I won the People's Choice Award in 1985 at the Jury Craft Festival with this one. It was a good design. It was good to me. And this is an old model, much more stylish now, of the rocker. And of course, if you read back there or anything know about me, you would know that I'm most known for my chairs. I'm known as a chair builder among woodworkers. And this is a very, very comfortable rocker. Also very pricey. And this is my first brass carving in all my life. And I happened to choose spruce twig and cones. I don't know if there's anything, maybe a thistle would be harder, but I would do that one. That took a long time. But the idea is great. The new ones are much more contemporary, but the comfort is still there, and it's been a good seller. And they're all over North America now.
What would a chair like that sell for?
Between $1,200 and $1,500. And that's still a bargain. I thought maybe if I doubled that, I don't think that I'd sell any less. I really don't think so. A friend of mine, well, I shouldn't say a friend of mine, but Sam Malouf is not a friend. I feel like he is because he's a designer of rocking chairs in California. His start at $5,600. And people who know us both figure that I should be around there because this is not much less a chair than his. But it's a good chair. But I guess when the Americans were here, I sold one. And Ken wanted you to make one from Saskatchewan woods. Me? Good. So I thought, well, that's pretty good. From Saskatchewan woods, eh? Well, Saskatchewan has some nice wood, but maybe may not all be from Saskatchewan. Anyway, I piece of that's paddock wood that was from his aunt's yard. That's where I got all this color stuff. I did a book match, you know, so it's the same on this side as that side, across. And then I went to his yard and got some carragana, where he was born. Got some carragana, and that's what the yellow is. And so it's off to the side and does this is their cross, you know, the religion's cross. And carragana right from where he was born. And the Purple Heart, or this amaranth, is from Belize. This is British Honduras. And that was, I didn't know this, but that was the only foreign mission he ever had. And of all the places that were important in his life are here, made by his friend. So it was a touching thing to wear. I made one for myself just to keep, because I'd never made a small thing before, and it turned out well. He's got the other. There's a rod right through, steel rod right through. So, you know, I would imagine that eventually the clergy will embrace, and they wouldn't want to break. He doesn't like anybody coming in, but it has a nice loft. Yeah, it's just one room, but it's a nice place. And when we have guests that stay here longer than 2 or 3 weeks for people, and once we get into the big house, we'll have a place to retreat from, retreat to or whatever. This is a nicely built one. This is a properly built one. A lot of time was spent fitting everything absolutely flawlessly, and it is done right. There's nothing wrong with that big one either, but it was done more hurriedly than this. Yeah.